Also, I apologize in advance. My daughter literally just burst in here to say she needed colored pencils. So that could happen again. Hi, welcome to How Literature Can Save the World, where we explore the written word's impact on our culture and our relationships with ourselves, each other, and the environment. I'm your host, Michelle R. Brady. I am a writer, editor, and attorney who just wants to talk about how we use the power of words for good and where you can find the ones that will help you see the world in a different way, like traveling without leaving your house. So grab a drink or a blanket or an animal to pet, and let's begin to make our lives more meaningful one book at a time.
The trouble that mankind makes is that he thinks he's Italian, he's German, he's Spanish. We're all humans on this beautiful paradise is our earth.
Hi, so today you get to meet Daniel Seifert. His writing is published in the New York Times, Consequence, and Gulf Coast, and his work received a special mention, which is pretty exciting, in the Pushcart Prize 2026 anthology. He's been twice shortlisted for the Bridport Prize, and he lives in Singapore and is working on a novel. So good to have you.
Great to be here. Look forward to getting literary and geeky.
I think that you are probably, I feel like every single person I talk to is more qualified to talk about books than me, but I just like them.
We're literally started a literary podcast, which is we all want to, and you have done it. So you're ahead points wise.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, I just refuse to think that I can't do things, and it works out. Okay, wait, so fill in some gaps for me because you live in Singapore, but you also went to high school in Singapore, right? And you went to college in the UK. Is that true? Because I have been stalking you a little bit.
Yes. So I'm classic expat Brad. We moved around a lot in my early years. So Bangkok, Hong Kong, Holland, and then we settled in Singapore from the age of 8 onwards. So yeah, went to up till high school there, and then I am a huge Anglophile. So going to uni in the UK was kind of the obvious choice. I went to uni in the UK there, and then settled back here. Married another expat Brad, but a Singaporean girl, and yeah, that is the incredibly boring, concise version of my life. I wish I was more exciting.
No, it's incredibly exciting.
So after I graduated from the UK, I did what all modern white men do and took a gap year rather than looking for a job. So I spent 6 months in South America, which was great, and told myself that I was also doing it to learn Spanish. So that the parents would help fund it. Yeah, so I started in Ecuador and then went kind of all the way down to Argentina. In between, I went to Bolivia, which was definitely the most mind-blowing destination. And there they have one of the oldest kind of continuously working silver mines in the world, called Cerro Rico. And it was started literally by the Spanish when they colonized it. And you can take tours there. And it is, fascinating and grim in equal measure because the story is basically about a teenage boy, Bolivian, who works there. And there are literally kind of young teenagers who work there, and then they work there their whole lives until many of them, die from either accidents or a horrible a condition called cirrhosis or silicosis, something like that, where the kind of dust underground gets to them. Halfway, there'll be like tours of, gringos who are just kind of going underground, and you hear the crump of dynamite that they use to kind of blast new veins. So that was such a unique experience that it's quite literally gold dust for, okay, how can I turn this into a story? It took about...
Isn't it quite literally silver dust though?
Yes, indeed, silver dust. Because that memory had lain dormant for a couple of decades, and then when I only quite recently started to get into writing fiction, I guess that one seemed the obvious, to use another bad metaphor, the obvious vein to mine from, because if you have something that is so exotic, so real, entering another person's life, that people still live like this, what feels like a kind of almost medieval profession. So yeah, it was a kind of obvious choice to write about.
I think it's really interesting, that we're kind of talking about tourism, being a voyeur in people's lives and a witness to who knows. I mean, I don't know how many people you spoke with, but if you don't write about it, people like me wouldn't ever know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite namby-pamby when it comes to a lot of quote unquote serious issues, but I do take quite a firm stance when people say, oh, you have to have lived experience of something to actually write about it. Otherwise, you're just, taking advantage of other people's pain and mining it for yourself. And I think if you take that to the nth degree, then essentially people would only ever write about their own narrow lives. There would be no curiosity about, wow, what must it be like to I don't know, be a midwife in Pakistan in the 1700s. That is the joy for me of both reading and creating literature, is being able to kind of plumb these depths that you otherwise would never have explored.
Right. And like taken to extreme, you could only write nonfiction. You couldn't make up anything. You couldn't make up characters.
Like Shakespeare was not a Danish prince, right? So we have to cancel Hamlet.
Yeah. And we should right now. I don't know what we're waiting for. But it is funny too, though, because like I actually was thinking about this topic earlier today, and I was thinking about it because so many people will write in like a different gender, and it's kind of hard because it's like, I mean, on the one hand, why shouldn't they, right? Like so many of our favorite books are like that, but on the other hand, I do kind of see the other point of view too. It's just like, where would the line be? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in some cases, I think that the very interesting last 10 years of identity politics that have been so concentrated, I think there is maybe a bit of a realization that if we take it too far, even those who care about literature, we're harming it by putting these narrow boxes in. So yeah, I mean, I'm all for just a place where people can write about anything and anyone, because that's how it, in these times when so few people are reading anyway, it needs to be exploratory and bold. Otherwise, we're just going to head down the kind of Netflix chute where people stop writing or reading anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And, sort of on that vein, but pun intended, but it wasn't intended, so unintended. But not exactly the same. I was thinking about like just how many hands are in the editorial process of, anything that goes through major publication, and you can't help but have things become less original and more streamlined and more the same. It's the same, and you can have these like little glimmers from small presses or whatever that can be bold and do their own thing. But I do kind of worry sometimes that it's all very cyclical, and I don't want to be like a downer here, but I don't know, it feels like I like this last thing, so they're just going to give me another thing that's exactly like it. And like, I want to be challenged a little bit,
Yeah, it's interesting. So true. I mean, the algorithm, I think even in non-algorithmic processes, like an old school literary mag, I guess those people, because they're surviving on such a razor wire, right? No margins and then what have you. So maybe there is a sense that they are getting influenced by other places that are influenced by the algorithm anyway. So it's okay, this is really so hot right now, vampires or whatever,
Yeah.
or this style of writing. So we should follow that. So I totally agree. I mean, just this idea of kind of boldness. And I think the older I get, being attracted to just something that is strange, where I maybe don't even get it. I'm not even sure if I like it, but it's
Yeah.
utterly unique.
Yeah.
And that is sometimes its own merit.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I don't have to like something to appreciate the novelty, or
Yeah,
or the
100%.
yeah, or like yeah, exactly. Okay, so sorry. I just want to tell everybody who is listening, the 5 people or whoever. But Dan wrote me something. Is it okay that I call you that, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Wrote something very interesting to me. And he's one of the first people who has pitched me something that I felt like was entirely original. Not that, okay, that sounds terrible, but it's just like people pitch this, kind of the same thing because okay, I'm gonna have to cut this or change it somehow so it's not insulting. But the point is, he said he wanted to talk about The Catcher in the Rye, because its meaning changes every time he reads it.
But I think it is the most regular reread of my life, since it's also one of those books where you can't even it feels like it's always been with you, which is a kind of, I'm not sure if you have that experience where a book is so good, it kind of feels like it was almost grew organically, and you don't have almost a clear memory of, yeah, I was 12 when I read it, and in third period of eighth grade or whatever. So I think I probably, if memory serves, I read it also at the perfect time. I was, let's say, 13, 14. So I'm a bit younger than Holden anyway. So Holden becomes this incredibly attractive and mysterious character, who's kind of living this really dangerous lost weekend. And yeah, I mean, we can discuss all of the dozens of reasons why I love it. But for those, it became just one that I read every year, and it changes as you age, which I think is a cliche, but it's so true.
No, that's so true.
You go from looking up to Holden, oh my God, he's this kind of older teen who's being such a rebel, to yes, there are millions, and I think we can discuss that as well. There's so many people who are forced to read this book, and then they just think that Holden is a whiner. I can't quite get on board with. And then, now at this age, you kind of feel like you're Holden's uncle or protective father. And you're almost looking back, not just at the character, but at yourself when you were that age, which I think is why it's such a universally beloved book. I mean, yes, it's set in the 50s, but for me, it has aged remarkably little. It doesn't feel like, watching Rebel Without a Cause or something. It feels, very kind of 50s in its slang.
Yeah.
I think you could take this to anyone and anywhere, and, go to a jungle in Malaysia and give this to a kid. And because its themes are so universal of feeling, alienated and not knowing whether you're 15 or 45, not knowing what you want in life and feeling that you can't connect with people. Those themes are never going to go away.
And okay, I just have to ask, what are the other books that you reread? Because I just want to see how different or similar they may be. Out of curiosity.
Yeah, let her lean over. I have a whole shelf of basically my kind of the ones that I return to. It is very pale, stale, and male, so feel free to jump me on that. So Graham Greene, The Quiet American, I just reread that. Amazing. And written around the same time, actually. East of Eden.
Yeah.
Weirdly, also a book from the 50s. It's like I'm discovering a weird theme here.
Look at this.
Ian McEwan's Saturday.
Oh, I actually... Okay, no, keep going.
No, go ahead.
I was disappointed in Saturday. Maybe because by the time I read it, when the hype gets so big and then you just expect something, but it's like when you discover it on your own, you're like, oh my God, I got to tell everybody. But then when 5 different people tell you to read it and you're like, but
it's the curse of the It book. I mean, that was an interesting one because I think it's the power of when you don't have another book you're reading something, you're not loving it, and you don't have another book to kind of jump onto as an escape wrapped. I think it was those scenarios.
Yeah.
Because I'm with you. Like it's so, that book, which follows, for people who don't know, it follows an incredibly close detail, a single day in the life of a neurosurgeon in London, just after, kind of in the early 2000s. So it's a lot about also the politics of the Iraq wars and things like that. But it was so close into this writer's skin. It felt like so little was happening because it's so granularly kind of talking about how he has to go buy some ingredients to cook dinner that night, or his musings in the shower, that actually I was ready to fling it away after 100 pages. And it was one of those few times where I've had that just almost Damascenean wonderful conversion of going from kind of hating this book and its slowness to just suddenly getting it. And then again, that's kind of one of the many ingredients of literary pleasure, when suddenly something clicks. It's kind of like hearing let's say a difficult Radiohead song, 3 times, 4 times, you're like, this is horrible, and you're just hating it more and more. And then suddenly you're in the right vein and it's 3 a.m. and you're in a particular mood and suddenly you get it.
Yeah.
So that actually is another one that I reread probably every other year or so.
Okay, I do have to admit that I flung it, and that's probably why. Like, after I felt like I gave it enough time, but now you have definitely swayed me to try again.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes as well, there's so many books that I want to enjoy and I fling them again and again. And I'm one of these idiots who will buy a book, fling it, and then it goes in the discourse 5 years later and I rebuy it. So,
Yeah.
half of my budget goes kind of to just rebuying books, which is pure idiocy. But sometimes what I'll try and do then is then I'll read it in quote marks through audiobook.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes that just kind of helps become an easier way to get into something. Or
Yeah, depending on the narrator.
that I exactly right. And I do feel like narrators nowadays uh, they will kind of mispronounce some of the basic place names, and that is definitely one reason, one of my pet peeves why I will kind of cling something metaphorically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. But, it is funny too what you were saying about, just hitting something at a different time in your life. Because I recently reread The Color Purple, or The Color Purple, like, I never remember if it's A or the. And I remember when I first tried to read it, not able, I was not able to handle some of the themes, and it was just really hard. And I feel like now that I'm old, I am like, yes, I get this. I understand this. Like, I can handle this. So it's a good point to try things again, at different points.
Yeah, for sure. So what was your response to, you said this was a reread of Catcher in the Rye for you? Like what, assuming it had been a lot of years, what
Yeah, it's been a lot
was
of
your
years.
response to it?
So here's the funny thing. When I read it the first time, I liked it. I especially liked his conversational tone. I always am a fan of a close, an internal first person. I love feeling like I'm with the narrator every single second. And I really like that it was such a short time period, because I feel like it was a really cool window into somebody's life. And obviously, I think I don't remember how old I was. I think it was probably in high school, maybe. I don't know if it's because I have kids, because my whole life changed after that, and everything I think about everything is different. But I now think, and you're not gonna like this, I now think that he's a spoiled rich kid who's never had any real problems, and so he's sort of creating them. And I feel bad for him that his family doesn't seem to give a crap about him and isn't looking out for him at all. Um, but and I do feel bad for him, like, as a kid, but at the same time, I just feel like it's a little self-indulgent. So it's not that I hate him at all as a human, because he's not a real human, but yeah, I just felt like there's bigger problems out there, man.
No, I mean, I think it's a common thing that people respond to, and maybe it's a response to what I think the book is doing so well that actually it buries
It's a compliment.
it buries his real problems in amongst his just kind of teenage
Angst.
angst and annoyances. And I think that kind of goes back to the skill with the voice, which you responded to, and the fact that from the very first paragraph, the very first line, you're really in this teenager's head, which again is why it's so ageless.
Yeah.
I think all teenagers, or a certain kind of teenager, that it's kind of a mile a minute, and you can really feel like, not to make light of it, but I think Holden would be a kid who benefited from Ritalin,
Oh, yeah.
because he's really just, it's almost this word vomit of this story, right? If you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born and what my lousy childhood was like and how my parents were occupied and all before they had me and all that David Copperfield kind of crap. But I don't feel like getting into it if you want to know the truth. And then he gets into it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's this wonderful kind of irony of I don't really want to, and then 300 pages of his past. But I think it's almost buried within his, superficial worries and annoyances. Actually, by the end of the book, this is a kid who, he's only 15 at the time, and he lost his younger brother to leukemia when he was 13, so kind of less than 2 years ago. He witnessed a classmate of his not long after that commit suicide, jump out of a window. His parents, like, kind of clearly don't kind of care for him. They just see him as a problem kid, and they shunt him from school to school.
Yeah.
And again, just a really interesting clever choice by Salinger, and this is one of the many lessons that I'd kind of pick up as a writer, is that he doesn't show the parents. There's one scene where the mother is then talking to his kid sister, but to emphasize Holden's isolation from his family. He's not talking to his parents. He's kind of actively avoiding his parents, which for me is, you kind of get the sense that they've given up on him a little bit. He also has this kind of heartbreaking line, and again, I think that's what I respond to. Like the pain of Holden is, you do have to work at it a little bit as a reader to kind of cumulatively see what this kid is going through. And there's a bit such a fascinating scene, and again, which changes every time I reread it, when he's staying over near the very end with Mr. Antolini, and he goes to sleep on his couch, and then he wakes up and Mr. Antolini is kind of touching his head in the dark, and he absolutely freaks out and kind of leaves the apartment. And he says, he's something like, I always seem to, attract those pervert types. If you want to know, that kind of thing has happened to me so many times. So again, is this a kid who actually is also the survivor of just, assaults and things like that? But he also says at the very beginning of the book, I'm the biggest liar you ever saw in your life. Yeah. So again, you have all these competing layers of, he's telling us all this from the horse's mouth, as he were, but the horse's mouth also says that he lies about so many things. So there's this fascinating lens that you can read it through of believing him, not believing him. Even that scene itself with Mr. Antolini, this is one of the things that changes every time I read it, is sometimes I read Mr. Antolini as almost a future version of Holden. Because that teacher is, he's got the gift of the gab, he's got some wisdom, but he's kind of clearly unhappy. He's estranged from his wife. He drinks heavily. So is this actually just a grown-up Holden who is incredibly lonely, and this was the teacher, by the way, who covered the dead body of the kid who committed suicide with his jacket.
Yeah.
So is he just kind of incredibly worried about Holden, and he's kind of touching his head in the dark, saying, almost as a protective measure.
That's how I read it. The second time, this last time, that's how I read it. I read it as like, of course, that would be what he was afraid of, but in my mind, it could be also that he doesn't recognize paternal care because he's just never had it, like somebody actually just caring about him.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I think all of this makes it sound like the book is only kind of dealing with this pain as well. But the probably primary reason why it's so easy to return to is it is damn funny. I think that's what reviewers and in the kind of academic ether, people don't always mention as much, is just the comedy of it, both from a stylistic point of view, and just the kind of just those paradoxes that will come from Holden's mouth. He says things like, I'm quite illiterate, but I read a lot. Or the dialogue he has. I love the scene when he is first escaping Pensy and he's on the train.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, oh, should we get a drink in the dining car? I said it suave as hell. And the mother replies with, are you quite sure you're old enough, dear? So again, it's just this comedy of, again, it's so universal. This kid who's on the cusp of adulthood and sort of wants to be seen as older than he is, and whenever he tries to order a drink, bartenders are like, no, I have to card you. Yeah, I think that's just so funny.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is funny. It's a funny book. I think one of the problems with the book is that because his voice is so original but like very familiar, I feel like I read it in a day, and I think in a day then you start to get a little annoyed at some of the issues, and you also start to forget how young he is, because the things that you just brought up, yeah, I mean, obviously those are factors that I just stopped even thinking about, because I was just like, oh my God, guy, just go talk to your dad, just go talk to your mom, like just try, okay? And I think if I would have spaced it out more, I would have had a little more empathy. I don't know. It's hard to say, but you definitely bring up some good points there.
I was wondering if you, another reason this book is quite fascinating is its almost metatextual aspect. And it's something that I kind of, again, will sometimes come to the fore when I'm reading it, and sometimes I'll have completely forgotten sort of the history of Salinger himself. And I'm not sure if you read into his background, but the fact that
No, go for it. I don't know much about this stuff.
yeah, so Salinger, the kind of famous thing about this was he carried the opening chapters of this book in his pocket when he was storming Normandy on D-Day. So he was a soldier in World War II.
It's crazy.
And he was either kind of frontline or he was like frontline military intelligence. And one of the things that he experienced was he helped liberate one of the concentration camps, so Dachau or Auschwitz or Belsen, or one of those. And he had a breakdown close to the end of the war, and kind of never. He definitely had PTSD, but he obviously was such a secretive type. It wasn't something that he brought up. And I think reading this book as almost that lens of, this is a book that was published in 1951, and it's almost the era of, the war is over, life is good, America is incredibly prosperous, and he's in New York City, and everyone is just kind of drinking, and there's great hotels and things, and there's this one character, there's one young man who is like, in incredible pain, and he can't seem to communicate it to anyone because they're all just kind of busy with their incredibly petty problems. So that, for me, it's such an interesting almost metaphor for PTSD. But I wanted to get your take. Obviously, you're ex-military, right? Whether that kind of resonates in any way with you.
Well, I would have to tell you, I mean, that's true, but I don't claim to have PTSD, so I'm not quite sure. I don't know why. I don't know why. Maybe because he's so funny and, he's obviously depressed and sad, but I don't know, maybe because he makes light of so many things. It's really hard for me to know why that is for me, but I do see, links to anybody carrying around trauma. I mean, I don't know if I have PTSD, but we all have seen things in our lives that we probably didn't want to see and have experienced things that were difficult. And I think that juxtaposing those experiences with mundane, everyday, superficial activities is a trial, even that I write about. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you said that. I'm like thinking out loud right now, but I can definitely see that.
I think it kind of speaks to, as a writer, probably one reason I reread this is just kind of sheer jealousy. Because when I do think of it through that lens, it's almost like, was he making a conscious choice to kind of exercise those demons in a way that is almost like that Emily Dickinson line, "Tell it slant." She very easily could have written a piece about, an ex-soldier on furlough, and he's lost, and and he's not a 15-year-old kid, he's a kid in his 20s or whatever. So it's almost, did he set himself that challenge of, where you could read it through that lens, but there's nothing explicitly, military or war-based about it at all. Which maybe, again, is why, if he had done that, then it would be read so narrowly as a post-World War II, a soldier's tale.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, I think you can read it through the lens of anyone who is kind of lonely and seeking connection.
Yeah. You definitely are giving me some things to think about this. I don't want to have to reread it again in a day, but.
So, I mean, one other thing that, and this literally came from the very last reread I did, which is insane that I've read it like 15 times and only just kind of noticed this, but the kind of accepted wisdom, right, is that this is literally the monologue of Holden as he is talking to what's assumed to be his therapist, right, because he's in some sort of rest asylum, which he mentions at the end. But there's a line somewhere in the middle, I think, that actually flips that script's 180 degrees, where he says, a lot of people, especially this one psychoanalyst guy they have here, keeps asking me if I'm going to apply myself when I go back to school next September. So literally the implication there is he's not talking to a psychoanalyst. And I think when you flip the script up, you're not imagining him literally on a couch talking to some white-haired Freudian. So who's he talking to? And it kind of almost becomes more tragic or more darkly comedic when he's talking to someone in this facility, but it could just be like some poor person that he's cornered in the cafeteria.
Like the janitor or something.
Yeah, he's so lonely that he can't even get the understanding from his analyst, so he's just talking to anyone else. So yeah, I thought that was just interesting how as a reader you can kind of have this assumption that you think you know the work, you think you know the book, but even the things that you're so familiar with, there are blind spots. And yeah, I mean, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but that's one of the real attractions of being loving a certain book and being able to return to it again and again. Is the pleasure maybe as you grow up, not necessarily reading new books, but returning to the books you love. I don't know whether would you say you're more of a discover new books type of reader or a rereader?
I'm like smiling right now. So yeah, I would say I have a tendency to fling when I'm not engrossed. I give it 100 pages, and I feel like I've given you sufficient amount of time to convince me that I should keep reading,
And
which is probably kind of messed up, to be honest.
no, I agree.
I do feel bad about it sometimes, but yes, I reread a lot because I want to remind myself if I've had a couple of flings in a row that maybe I'm a little picky. So I'm going to reread Saturday, because you have convinced me. I'm very easily convinced that I should try again. Actually, I kind of want to read Catcher in the Rye again because now one of the things I keep thinking of is because he's so conversational and it's such an easy read. I feel like you miss a lot, like uh, like it kind of lulls you into his mind and you're just like, oh, this is just what we're doing now, and it's just totally normal. And then there's those
Yeah.
little clues, like you just said, that I don't remember at all. Like I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of is the fascinating thing about style, right? How it can, lure you in, but maybe sidetrack you. And you obviously feel like you're so close to the character because they're speaking to you in their own words. Um, but is that almost not a red herring, but it's such a kind of word vomit of this young kid that, how are you going to catch it all? Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
uncatchable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's an interesting thought experiment because what if this book had been written from third person? So you're not kind of being chatted to, but you're viewing him from a distance, and the tone then becomes, that kind of third person authorial, slightly more neutral tonality. It would turn everything on its head.
But I do think that's exactly right. Like this, some books cannot be. I mean, hell, I would say that most books shouldn't be. If they could be a different POV, then you got a problem probably. I mean, I don't know. I'm certainly no expert about writing books. I don't know where mine's going anywhere. Oh, we should talk about your book actually. Is this a weird transition? I'm not very normal. So I don't think people would be surprised. But or do you not want to talk about it? We don't have to if we don't want to.
Well, let's just say it is definitely on the back burner and needs to be on the front burner.
You write all the time. You're writing essays, you're writing poetry, you're writing stories. You're all over the place. I think I was just like, geez.
So this is probably what I would call like productive procrastination, where the real goal is there,
Mhm.
and I am taking the side roads of stuff that is quote unquote easier than the marathon of the novel.
Mm.
So poetry has been a really interesting. Talking about 180s, I hated poetry right up until when I started doing my creative writing masters a couple of years ago, which kicked off sort of the fiction and creative writing as a whole. And then, yeah, suddenly it just kind of clicked both as a reader and as a writer. It's such a useful way to kind of feel, kind of creatively fulfilled by writing, 10 or 15 or 20 words and feeling like you've constructed your own little universe. To use a terrible metaphor, it's like kind of making a really quick and simple sandwich rather than, a three course meal of my as yet will it ever be finished novel. Yeah, so it's an interesting just to use that to kind of almost clear the decks and feel like I've done something creative and something I can be proud of, and hopefully submit and maybe can get published somewhere, but usually not. But I still feel like I've done something. I've been a writer for a day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you say it so lightly. A poem is very difficult to me. I've always wanted to be able to write poetry. I mean, frankly, so just for listeners, Dan has a poem in Terrain, and you wrote it, I think, or at least it was published last year, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you have so many you probably don't really keep track, but I feel like it's very apt for right now as well. I'm not going to read it because I would butcher it, and I'm not going to. And I'm not going to ask you to do it unless you want to. But I really liked it, and it
I
felt
didn't.
very. Would you mind? I mean, I feel bad because I'm just totally putting you on the spot. This is not what you said. You wanted-
No, no, not at all. I'm glad it resonated with you.
It
I won't say
absolutely did.
I won't say a fun one to write, but yeah.
I feel like that's the thing, though, right? Some things are just necessary. They don't have to be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think again it was just to some backstory. I was writing it um, probably during like a stressful work week or whatever. So the title of the poem is "Calming Exercise for the 21st Century," and it kind of became a poem that was both about this, just the stress of maybe daily life, but also the world around us, which spoiler alert, is in a crazy place these past few years. But anyway, so it's called "Calming Exercise for the 21st Century." I know it's getting late, my friend, time unlikely to untick itself. But let me tell you about air. They say a horse's lungs, inflated, could fit a full-grown man, snug nut in beastly shell. Your lungs can feel as free if you bathe them in the bromide of a primal scream. Now, they say a laugh can be a balm too, but not in days like these. Besides, my fears are piglet fat, and know that laughter doesn't rhyme with slaughter. So, ready? Fill the cartridge of your voice. Breathe in and ever in. Eat air until it feels like when you were a kid chewing the wind in winter, all goggle-eyed, throat smoking at how a flake will coat a city. Inhale the bitumen, burnt vowels, the ticker tape hate, consume it all until the cartridge is full. What comes out? Well, I'm curious myself.
Yeah, man. It does feel like right now. I guess it's felt this way for a long time, maybe. And so you're saying that this kind of poetry, you just pop out in a day. That's
Well,
amazing to me.
not to be honest. I guess it's a potential strength, but also a weakness because poetry also speaks to my inherent laziness. Because I'm envious actually of the poets who are on the opposite end of the spectrum who will work at something for weeks and months and years and polish it. And it's only when it feels like everything is clicked into place that they will, send it out into the world. And I guess I totally kind of wish that I had those qualities. But I think one of the things that, as I said, attracts poetry to me is that it's a thing of the moment. Not to get too pretentious about it, but I do feel like that genre is the one that is most conducive to kind of divine inspiration, this, age-old idea of the muse that you have something right now. And if it can't be written in under 30 minutes, then the thing itself will kind of be overworked.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not the right way or the only way, but that's the way that it feels, the process feels most conducive to me.
You say that, you apply that to poetry, but for me, that's how I write everything is just, I can't stop. And when it happens, it happens. And it's not a very workable situation, frankly, because you can't really prep for it. I have to just not be doing anything but writing. And then I wake up in the middle of the night scribbling things, trying to understand what I wrote the night before. Sometimes I just stay up all night typing. And then when whatever it is gone, like right now, I kind of like you, I'm sort of procrastinating on my, work in progress by making an outline that's freaking like 20 pages long about everything that's going to happen, but I can't see them, yet. So it's interesting. It's
But it's
interesting.
wonderful, isn't it? I think it's people who haven't experienced it. It is kind of such a great. It literally feels like a drug. It's this flow state where you're hammering away, and then suddenly an hour and a half is gone, like the afternoon is gone because you've just been in this world.
But the
Yeah.
scary thing is what if it doesn't happen again? That's so scary.
Which I guess again is why it's so addictive and beautiful, because you feel like you have to seize the day and carpe the diem now, because the next DM might not want to be carved.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's so true. Okay, I don't want to end any of this until we get to hear other books that have shaped you. Now, I know you have already talked about a lot of the books you reread, but what other books do you feel like have changed who you were and or who you are and what you wanted out of life and all of the things that, really mattered to you?
Yeah, I probably will not be the first of your podcast guests to say how annoying this request was. But asking someone to pick their favorite formative books or influential books, wow, it was literally Sophie's choice time. It was like trying to maybe pick one that it's probably the book I've also gifted the most, or the one I recommend the most. It's called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly by
Oh, I've never read that.
a French author called Jean-Dominique Bauby, and it's a nonfiction actually. They made a movie out of it, and it's honestly just talking about like what the book's plot is and what it is. Sounds like fiction because it's the true story of a guy who in the 90s, I think he was the editor of French Vogue, lived an incredibly glamorous and successful life, and then he suffered a catastrophic stroke. And he's one of the few people to kind of survive something called locked-in syndrome, where his entire body could not move. The only thing he could move was like one eye and one pinky, something like that.
Yeah.
And he writes this book about the experience, and he gets moved to a hospital on the north coast of France, and he writes a book by having someone literally sit there with a big piece of paper with all the letters of the alphabet. And they go, A, E, not A, B, C, they go by the frequency of letters used.
Yeah.
So I don't even know what it would be in French. It's like, A, Q, E, I. And then he blinks when it's the correct letter. And that's how he wrote this book. It's the kind of, just backstory that will give you chills.
Yeah.
And yet it's not just a kind of a book to read because of how crazy it is. It's also incredibly beautifully written. It's like 120 pages or something, and it's just about his daily life. How he starts, I think, by describing the light coming into his room and the things he can see around him, and a lot of them are almost like talismans around the room for his friends who are kind of praying for him and praying even for specific parts of his body. So he has outsourced like prayers to a church in the south of France, and they pray for his little toe or whatever. So it's incredibly beautiful, but it's the spark of humor that runs throughout it. So in terms of how it's influenced me, I think it's just a book about the sheer beauty of life. I mean, there's no greater cliche, and yet you read that book, and it's truly a book about the human spirit and not being, being able to fight through the most difficult pains imaginable, and to do it with a smile on your face.
Oh, you can tell me as many books as you want. What I want are for people to go buy or check out, whatever, read books. And I think one thing I've noticed is that people don't know where to start. And if you're like me and you pick up a book and you fling it and you're just like, ugh, I don't have another book to read, so I'm just going to give up for a while. I mean, you waste a lot of time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just off the top of my head, I mean, that one obviously feels very heavy thematically. So one that, and it's a series, which is always nice, that I've loved since I was a teen is it's called the Flashman series. It's not heavy literature by any means, but it's just, we were talking about comfort reads. And again, the backstory is quite interesting. So the character Flashman is a kind of ostensibly a Victorian rogue, just a kind of scallywag and womanizer in the Victorian era.
I love scallywags.
And yes, and it's just, is there a more satisfying word to say?
No, it's the best. I'm so glad you said it.
Scallion and scallywag, or nincompoop. And to be honest, he is all three. And actually, this character was originally mentioned in a Victorian book called Tom Brown's School Days, but it was actually written, this series, in the 60s, 70s, 80s by a writer called George MacDonald Fraser. So basically, it uh, purports to be the quote unquote real memoirs of this scallywag. And it's just this soldier who he kind of loves the glory of being a soldier, but he is the world's biggest coward. So again, easily you have this great kind of foible of a man who all he wants to do is like, drink and he admits it himself that he's a complete bully. And yet he is part of kind of some of the biggest moments in history. So they function as comedy, they function as adventure novels, and they function as actually, because George MacDonald Fraser, the writer, he was a journalist and editor. So he's bringing all these moments of Victorian history that shaped the world to life. So the very first book, Flashman, he gets drafted into the army, and he goes and fights in the first Afghan war, when the British Army were kind of completely destroyed in the Khyber Pass. So you learn about, actually, because this author is a journalist, so he researches, the fact that when they fled the city, the British, and they were kind of trying to leave the attacking forces, they left with grand pianos and bottles of wine and stuff, and this is all based on historical fact. And there's other books where he becomes part of the Indian Mutiny, where you learn actually really interesting backstory about the geopolitics of that age, where something called the Great Game, this kind of almost Cold War in the 1800s between Britain and Russia kind of saw the encroaching threat of the British Empire in their sort of backyard, their southern central backyard, and how they were kind of doing all of these, espionage things to try and control British power. So you actually learn, and there's the actual footnotes in the back that will kind of say, these were the sources, and this is some more of the backstory. So you can read them to kind of learn a little bit about the world and how even it functions today. But again, it just kind of comes down to this. And they're also written in the first person, like
that's fun.
Catcher in the Rye. So you're being helped to by this incredibly charming, admitted bully and coward. And I think that's, again, as a writer, what a great way into a book where outwardly he is, the most militarily awarded soldier in the British history. And, he's been pinned by Queen Victoria, and yet he kind of says, it's all a lie. And that for a character to say, suddenly you're like, wow, I'm in. He's a reprehensible character, actually. But he also kind of talks about these hinge moments of history, like when the British sacked the Summer Palace in Peking. He kind of talks about these some quite dark historical moments with kind of a real clear eye, and he kind of unpacks the lies of colonialism through kind of the prejudices of that time as well. So actually, it's like is common to say, it's not a book I think that could be written today, because he's been written as someone who is as racist as a Victorian colonel. But I think, again, that's valuable, because you don't necessarily want a book where a character who would have been prejudiced and racist and have had all these skewed views suddenly been written with a modern eye, that actually it was everyone was equal, because that kind of whitewashes history, right?
Yeah.
And the darkness that was the common view at that time. So I've gone back to being pretentious about them. But if people are looking for just great adventurous books with insane, funny twists, high comedy and just great language, then there's an entire series of 10 of those books.
So you were like incredibly persuasive. I feel like I feel like you have persuaded me, not even deliberately, but perhaps because you weren't like trying to give The Catcher in the Rye another read, to read The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Flashman series. I actually think that sounds really interesting, because my husband and I read something together. Like we have whatever book we want to read that's sort of like lighter, but not ridiculous, I guess. Usually we read sci-fi or something, but that's something that we do, and I think this would be really fun.
Great. Yeah. Let me know how you get on.
Man, so this is really great.
Thanks so much for your time. This has been really fun.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, and in the words of my daughter,
let's hip hop our way out.